Okay, welcome everybody to DG Unlimited's Creative Unlimited session of Next Level. Today we are going to be talking with and listening to the Pearls of Wisdom from Dougal Perman, who is our inspirational guest. Dougal is managing director of Inner Ear, which is a production company, and they produce music and digital media. He specializes in live programming, and he makes feature and documentaries and digital, and is the director of a digital media consultancy. So Dougal, welcome to the session this morning. Thank you for joining us. Tell us a little bit about your work and what you do, and then we can get started.
Thanks, Tabby, and hi, thanks very much for having me along. Yeah, I'll give you try and give you a brief overview of what I do, because I do various things, and then I'd like to chat with each of you, and very much want this make this as useful a session as possible for everyone. So Tabby's worked out, suggested a useful agenda of discussion points, but we can really tailor this to what you want to get out of it, which I think would be a useful way of doing it. So yeah, I'm what do I do? I'm a program maker, content creator, and got into that really through growing up around the media. My parents are journalists, and always wanted to go into print media actually, but became very interested in radio at university through student radio, and then started in a career with a friend from university to launch an internet radio station called Radio Magnetic, which is still going as a project in the background of what we do. But although I don't have very much to do with it anymore, but we kind of have pioneered a lot of what we learned through running one of the original and longest running internet radio stations, and learned a lot about program making and internet distribution, especially live streaming. Initially, predominantly like audio, but venturing into video eventually. But really was also then approached in relatively early stages of what we do to do quite a lot of training and workshops and consultancy on the development of distribution technologies like live streaming and later podcasting, but also creating content predominantly, and evolved into a production company that really does that. And through our own creative projects, Radio Magnetic, and then more recently, we launched a traditional music web TV channel called Trad TV. And then we also have a series of audio walking tours called Walking Heads. So we've experimented with our own creative brands, we mostly do work for clients, and work extensively in music and music media, especially that mostly features around live music and live performance, but also work across creative industries and culture and what we do. Recently, we create a lot of content in a kind of traditional TV and radio style, but most of it is for online distribution. Last year, we did produce a 30-minute documentary feature about 10 years of the Say Awards, Scottish Album of the Year Award, which I've been involved in throughout its lifespan. But we mostly will make live programs around cultural events. So last week I was very busy with the World Pipe Band Championships, which we stream, and Piping Live Festival in Glasgow. I'm trying to remember the chronology of everything. At the beginning of the month, we were in Skye live streaming a piping competition, and also collaborating on creating a program around the relaunch of Talisker's distillery, Stylisco Distilleries Visitor Centre in Skye. We're doing a number of different projects with the owners of that Diageo, with different distilleries around the Highlands and Islands. Next week, I'm off to Islay to do another project with them at Kalila Distillery. Other colleagues are in Dunoon for Cowell Highland Gathering, where we live streamed the World Highland Dancing Championships. And we thought that the piping world was intensely competitive until we got into Highland dancing. Then we're off to Inverness for the Northern Meeting piping competition, which I'm told might feature between 20 and 30 pibrochs in a row, which is a challenge for anyone. Although we do a lot of work in traditional music, and especially in piping, mostly through our long and good relationship with the National Piping Centre. So yeah, that's a kind of handful and snapshot of things. But yeah, I think it's interesting that, and I like the fact you've called it blended creative events. I think that's a nicer way, a more useful way of describing it than hybrid events. And that term kind of amused and annoyed me in equal measure as we came out of the pandemic, because everybody talked about it like it was something new, in a way, like, you know, as if streaming stuff was something new that happened as a result of the pandemic, as if video meetings was something new. And none of that's true, but, you know, it was all accelerated massively, and the pandemic was a catalyst for the adoption and development and utilization of these media. But the hybrid thing amused and annoyed me, because we've been doing that for 20 years, you know, so streaming live events and making them available to an online audience. So there's lots of different ways of doing it. There are levels of integration. There's kind of a balanced approach to where the online is as important as the real world, or it's real world first or digital first. And you know, so many different ways of going about it. And I've streamed events and created live programs and live experiences where there may be thousands of people at the event and hundreds online, or a few people at the event and thousands online, or tens of thousands online, or even hundreds of thousands online. And it just varies massively. So there's so many different ways of going about it. So I think it'd be really useful if we can get you know, there's including yourself, Tabby, there's 4 of you. So let's is that right? Or actually I've got hide non-video participants. I've just seen there's 6. So maybe we've got, yes,
we've got Stuart, Kat,
yeah.
Helen, and David, and me.
Turn off hide.
I've got questions for you too.
Yeah.
There are 3 others who registered, so I'm hoping that they'll be able to come along. I'm keeping an eye out just to see.
Yeah, great. So I think, but what I'd like to do now is just, if you wouldn't mind just saying hello and telling me a little bit about yourself and what your interest in live streaming, or you know, especially in blended events, and like doing something that is both a real world event and available to an online audience is. And then we can talk through different ways of doing that. And I discussed with Tabby when we were arranging this that rather than having a set presentation structured workshop to follow, this would be more responsive and discursive. I can jump off and show you stuff. I can, you know, we can get into any number of different things, but I really would like to tailor it to what you want to get out of it. So let's just see where we go. So who should we start with? David. So it's been ages since I've seen you, and it's great to see you again. Let's start with you.
Yeah, lovely to see you, Dougal. So I guess I'm here with my DGU hat on. So our interest is that when the pandemic first started, we immediately moved to turning the Creatives Unlimited program. We delivered digitally, delivered it all online, and we had a very sharp learning curve around that. But sort of, we learned some things, and we did not too bad a job as we went along. And now things that are opening up again, we're sort of wanting to sort of keep an online element to various things that we do, because actually that's proved really helpful, because we're a large geographical area. It saves people sort of traveling for like a 1 hour session, maybe driving to three hours. But also there are sometimes when the in-person meeting is, you can get so much more out of it. So we're in that process. We'd quite like to explore, say, doing sessions like these, doing some in-person, but also having them live streams blended at the same time. And they're quite two different events. So I guess it's just sort of like, what are the top tips, tricks of the trade, maybe advice on even equipment to best set ourselves up for that type of thing. So that's it, really.
Thank you. And can I just to clarify then, so the types of events would be that mostly you're talking about kind of workshop style, participatory event.
Yeah, it could be sort of like sessions like this, sort of like a mixture of sort of seminar, workshop, participatory things. We do a conference every 2 years, and we've always delivered them in person. We postponed the one that was going to happen during the pandemic because, so I'm not too sure whether we would go as far as delivering a whole conference blended, but I think we would be open to exploring it at this stage.
Yeah.
The great thing for a conference in our region is actually brings people together and it builds that sense of community. You can do that online as well, of course. So I think the jury's out on the larger scale events, whether we would jump into that as a blended thing. But certainly events like this and training for small groups.
Great, thank you. Yeah, one of the things that I've been project I've been really involved with for quite a long time is Expo North, based in Inverness, and as you probably know, it's a Pan Creative Industries conference and convention once a year in the summer, but also evolved into a all year round development program. It's kind of at a transition stage at the moment, because it's the initial program of funding from HIE is coming to a close, and they'll then reassess and hopefully rerun it and perhaps in a slightly evolved form. But they, most of its years since it's been in Expo North, and previously when it was Go North, it was a in-person event. And I was always on at them we could stream this, or, we could at least record it and make it available afterwards. And once at one of their on the road events in Dunoon, there was somebody from Jura actually said, how about you stream it into community hubs around Scotland? And so I'm not expecting to run one in Jura, but you could do one in a hall in Bowmore on Islay, and all of us in Jura could go hop over to Islay, and we could all get together and have. That's a great idea, and that kind of thing does happen, and and then, but you know, Expo North's primary focus was bringing people together, and the advance, you know, all the benefits of getting people in creative community around the Highlands and Islands together once a year. And so they weren't particularly keen to do that. Then, of course, the pandemic hit. They shifted all their activity, like with DG Unlimited, you know, all activity online. And they ran the conference, and they did it again this year, online only, rather than going for a blended approach, which I was very keen to try and do. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in the future. You know, they won't do online only again in the future. I would hope that they would move to a blended if they're going back to the real world. So there's loads of potential, but you can also, you know, it might be that you could record a lot of content and then make that available later. And I can look at different models around conferencing. But thanks very much.
That's interesting that you mentioned that, because I've noticed an awful lot of organizations tend to do one or the other. And aren't many that are actually doing a truly blended approach. And just to back up what David said, it's something we're really interested in, particularly in this region, because we're so geographically spread.
Yeah.
We have colleagues and creatives in Stranraer, and that sounds like, you know, we're all in Dumfries and Galloway, but actually from where I am, they're over 80 miles away, which is actually I'm closer to Glasgow, you know. So the geography of Dumfries and Galloway is such that, pandemic or no pandemic, this is an opportunity for us to do something that actually we should have all been doing years and years ago. And it's more to, it's not just to do with what we've learned in the pandemic. I'm interested to hear what the rest of the group think, but from my perspective, this is about reducing our carbon footprint, making sure we're not using too much fuel, sharing resources, and not wasting money, whether it's money from funders or our increasingly, you know, tight budgets. How can we actually do this in a way, use blended approaches in a way that gets the money where the money needs to be, so we're not wasting it on other things. I think that's what I'm trying to say. Let's continue with introductions from our guests here. Kat, do you want to go next? And hi
everyone.
Hi.
My name's Kat. I'm from the Studio Theatre, which is a wee community arts venue in Moffat. So we are also at a bit of a wee transition stage. So up till now, we've mainly focused on sort of regular workshops, mostly youth theatre. And we're kind of moving towards just a more diverse programme that brings in different events, different art forms, some films and things like that. Like I say, we are a small venue. We're about 50 seats, and sort of it's quite low footfall in Moffat. And a lot of the stuff that we want to do is sort of an alternative, quite left field kind of stuff that wouldn't necessarily meet sort of a huge audience in Moffat itself. So it's sort of about extending our capacity to reach different audiences, I guess, is why we're interested in looking at a blended approach. There's kind of two things it might be. So it might be sort of the more one-way kind of live streamed events type thing, but also a big part of our work is community participation. So I'm really keen to learn how you can deliver a workshop to both online and offline people and make it really rewarding for everyone. So yeah, so that's kind of where we're at. Again, we're like Tabby was saying, we're also sort of very keen to make our venue and our organisation as sustainable as possible, both financially and also environmentally. So yeah, so anything that we can do to reach new audiences, to extend access as well, because there's so many communities dotted around Dumfries and Galloway that just, it's really hard to engage with what's going on. Like, for example, simple thing, I don't drive. I can't go to any evening events in Dumfries even because there's no bus back. So yeah, so there's loads of things that are sort of barriers to participation geographically within the region. And we want creativity and the arts to be open to as many people as possible. So yeah, so to extend the reach and the accessibility is kind of key for us.
Brilliant, thanks. That's quite exciting. I like the sound of, you know, your ambition as a left field kind of theatre. So you're a theatre that produces work as well as you know, available for incoming productions.
We're not at the moment so our main work hasn't been the kind of actual productions side of it. It's more been the sort of workshops and kind of drama classes kind of approach. We might go into a wee bit of producing theatre because we're quite keen to support emerging artists. So we've got a couple of projects that are potentially doing that, and if we can extend their audience as well and get them in front of more eyes, then that's better for their kind of careers too. So yeah, so the production isn't a huge part of what we do, and neither is the incoming, to be honest, at the moment. So it's probably more around events, some emerging artist production, and then sort of creative workshops.
Okay, cool. And with all of that, then you think there's more potential to reach a remote audience, or, you know, as much potential to reach a remote audience as there is to reach an audience in person?
I would hope so.
Yeah. I mean,
on an emotional level, or
yeah, well, I guess, like, you know, if some of the topics that you said, like in terms of being left field, are quite niche, then you can absolutely, you know, try and reach that people who are interested in that online, as well as providing a space. And oh wow, there's loads of cool examples I can think of there that would be useful to reference. There's actually, in terms of education, creative education, is something that I first learned about in 2014, when I was lucky enough to be on this course called Cross Creative that TRC Media ran, and I was really lucky that there was 2 field trips involved in. One of them was to San Francisco in the Bay Area. And actually, this wasn't part of our scheduled program that we'd arranged of going to visit inspiring companies doing cool stuff that we learned about. This was because one of the guys on the course had sat next to a woman on a flight on our other field trip to Toronto, became friendly with her, and then they kept in touch, and we were just out for a drink with her and her friends, and she was like, you know what I do, right? When I was talking to her about what I did, and I was like, no, I don't actually know what you do. And she was like, well, I'm a designer for Creative Live. Oh, cool, what's that? She's like, well, come down tomorrow and we'll check it out. So went to see it, and it is amazing. It's based in Seattle, but they had opened an arm in San Francisco, and it started as running workshops for photographers and delivering online courses for photographers, and then expanded out into a massive, quite an extensive creative program across arts and creative disciplines. And their whole method was that they would run it as a live class, live workshop, but stream it online for free, then record everything, tidy up the recording, and then package up the course over as it was delivered over time, and then sell the course. and I've not checked them out in a while, but it's, you know, I loved the model, and at the time we had recently started working with the National Piping Centre. Yeah, Creative Live, it's coming up, and and they, you know, they were getting into doing pay-per-view online tuition, one-to-many tuition. They had already been doing one-to-one on Skype for a long time, and I was quite excited about this model, because I was like, look, it seems really bold to give away access for free, but really what you're doing, so you could, in theory, just watch all the time and consume the majority of their output for free. But no, that's not practical, so no one's going to do that. But it's a great way of just trying it out, getting people in, and because they had people in the studio as well, learning, and they had a couple of different studio rooms in the San Francisco branch, and they were really, like, it was well equipped, but it wasn't over the top, and they had they were just like big, airy kind of photography studio kind of rooms with cameras and lights and homemade backdrops and just rows of basic seats for people to come in and experience it in person. And I just thought it was a great model and quite inspiring. So I think there's tons of potential in what you're talking about. It'll come down to the kind of relationship you can build with the audience, but it's also an exciting potential to reach audiences, yes, across the region, but also potentially anywhere, you know, and then that becomes in a way a piece of cultural tourism stimulus as well, and you know, international outreach.
Yeah, no, that's a big part of what we're looking at, because the thing we hear again and again from sort of the young people that we work with is just that there's either nothing to do or it's just difficult to connect, and like there's loads of people who just feel like they don't sort of fit and conform with what's around them. They're isolated in these communities, and actually they are out there, and the more that we can do to connect them and make that space for them to join, the better. And that sounds like a really interesting model for Creative Life, because we are really interested in looking at passive income streams for the theatre, and just again with that financial sustainability, with the economic situation that we'll be going into, the more that we can do to actually create those, just get the most out of all of the stuff that we do and create, and give it a bit of a longer tail, the better. So that sounds really, really interesting.
Cool. Well, we can talk more about those kind of models and practically how you would do it as well.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks, Kat. Helen, do you want to share a little bit about your interests and needs in this subject area? Although I kind of know them, but share them with us.
I'm Helen Turner, work for the Hollywood Trust, which is a funder within Dumfries and Galloway, just Dumfries and Galloway. And so we have numerous applications. You know, at the moment we'll have 170 live projects that we're funding across the region. And there's a lot of them that are the arts, and a number of them have been doing, well, they're calling it hybrid or else blended delivery of their work. You know, Wigtown Book Festival has just done a blended approach. So for me, it's building my knowledge and understanding of the issue as we go out and speak to these organisations. So that's my reason for signing up today. So it's increasing my understanding of it.
And do you have, sorry, I'm just going to ask, do you have any particular models of events that you'd like to think about doing in a blended way?
We have a person, Hagen, who is delivering some training, but that's all online at the moment. Where he only started last year, and he thought he could do this, that, and the next thing, and then realised part-time there's a limit to how much you can do. So we've dropped the physical ones, and he's just doing some online at the moment. It's really about helping people fill in the application forms and what we are looking for at the moment. So, but he is looking at an event that will bring young people together, and that'll be something in the future. But I don't think he's thought of it being blended like this. He wasn't able to attend this session, but he's very knowledgeable. He works for Dumfries Music Conference, and so he's very skillful. But so there's very little that we are doing. It's more about the projects who are coming to us and asking us for money. So we probably commit at least 2.5 million a year to organisations across the region, which is across the board. It's not just the arts, it's support organisations, youth work, sports, just any organisation working with young people and enabling them to move forward.
Brilliant.
Thanks.
And so would you so that you've got an understanding of what's possible and of the potential when speaking to people from the different projects that you fund.
Sometimes they've not thought of something, or they thought this is the only way, and it's linking people up with other folks or other organisations, so they can learn from each other as well. Or so it's
so you might be able to say, oh, have you thought of the potential of doing that in a blended way, because you may be able to reach people who wouldn't be able to attend in person. And great.
So a lot of youth work organisations started delivering digitally during lockdown. But we're sort of finding most of them are going back to face-to-face, and they're saying, what about the young people that can't get in? Like Kat was saying, she can't travel into Dumfries. So it's the same with some young people who actually gained a service during lockdown because it was digital. LGBT youth have continued their digital youth club. But a lot of others have just drifted back to the old ways, rather than seeing thinking that people get caught up in the rut of how they used to do it, and have forgotten the new innovative ways they discovered during pandemic.
It seems to be that people are doing one or the other a lot. There aren't actually that many examples of people doing it blended, of the hybrid model, because it's difficult, I think, because there is quite a lot to get your head around, with a youth LGBT community focus that's invaluable to do online. But of course, there's also a great value in providing a meeting space in person. But it seems a real shame to go back to in person only, and then excludes the online participation, which may be a wonderful point of access and inclusion for people. And I think that it's even like with it will be interesting over the next few years to see how just meetings go, particularly in the public sector, I think, particularly in local authority public sector, where they used to, or in large corporations, where just sometimes the amount of meetings for the sake of meetings that would go on for the default length of a meeting being an hour, and you just chew up your whole day with pointless meetings that could have been done much more efficiently, became a lot more efficient, especially when people got away from the, do you know what, we don't actually need to do this for an hour. You know, sometimes, like, I've been involved in like public sector projects where it's a 20-minute meeting. It's amazing. And like, because you just discuss what needs to be discussed, and then that's it.
Getting that balance.
Yeah, it actually took a while though to get there.
Yeah.
And I'm in no hurry to go back to lengthy, pointless meetings. But at the same time, people then just filled up their calendar with online meetings, and then you get, your Zoom Teams, whatever, fatigue, and actually you're still in the same issue of, it's even worse actually, because it's meeting after meeting after meeting with no travel time in between to decompress, and you're at the screen all day, and then oh my goodness, I need to see people in the real world. So there is a balance to strike, but I think one of the key thing, and I think it's probably worth talking about this next, is the experience, making sure that the experience is good for both those in person and participating remotely. I was going to say online, but yes, they are joining in through online technology, but really it's about remote participation. And that takes a lot of thought. I suppose it's as difficult as you want to make it, and it's tricky because there is no one way of doing it. There's so many ways of doing it. And we were talking about different types of events, and each of them has a number of different ways of approaching it. It's just struck me though, actually, that Tabby, we didn't hear from you as a creative producer, and that could be useful just in case it throws up any other types of events.
I've got a list of needs here. No, I've been really looking forward to speaking to you. It's interesting that you mentioned meetings, because in my role as a producer, I'm having to do these kind of things for very small internal meetings as well as big events, whether that be AGMs or so on. So, like, for example, we had a recent team meeting. One of the things I like is the fact that if we have a blended team meeting, it affords us the chance to have people there in person, but anyone who can't physically drive and come to be with us can join online. The nightmare there was technical, but it's just about getting the sound right, and also having a set of kit that I can make it work wherever we go, which David and I are kind of working together on trying to, because the location that we were in, it was fine, we got everything working, but the sound was awful, and that was so frustrating. It was a huge amount of stress for me trying to figure out how to fix the sound while the meeting's ongoing. So that's one of my things, is actually like a remote blended meeting kit that I can take to any meeting facility, whether it's a hotel or wherever we hire a meeting room space, and I can do it with my laptop and my ring light and my mic and whatever else I need, so that I can incorporate all of that. That's one of my things that I'm trying to do. I'm also director of a community interest company called the Southwest Media Factory, and we do cinema screening. So we're running a film festival, and we've also just bought and developed our own streaming platform, which is going to go live the week that the festival opens. And the reason that we're doing that is because we're very interested in making sure that the people that we serve and the young people and the people in Dumfries and Galloway don't just have access to cinema, which they don't at the moment, but that's a long story, but they have access to good quality cinema experiences even from home. And at the moment, while everybody's talking about streaming and all these different things, a lot of the films that are available to people via their televisions require a subscription. So our streaming service won't require a subscription. So for example, there are films that are available free, but you need to subscribe to Netflix or Sky or Prime or one of these things. So it still costs money. Whereas what we've got is a streaming service that we're going to curate a selection of films, and you don't need to subscribe to us. You can just come in, and we are having a structure whereby there will be a ticket price, but we're also doing a pay what you can and a pay it forward, so that people who can't afford it can actually, right. So anyway, we have got a big network within the industry, and we're setting up director Q&As. So what I need to try and figure out is when I'm doing an in-person screening, and then the director comes to visit and we do a Q&A actually in the venue, how I can make the Q&A and the director bit available online, and that people can watch the video streamed and then take part in the live bit, if that makes sense. And then the other thing is sound quality and video quality. We had an event last year for DG Unlimited called Circuit, and we usually have it immediately after the EGM, and we have live performers. Now we managed it, it was fine, but I'm really interested in knowing how we can have live singers and performers, and we get the really get the sound quality. I know that depends on the sound quality of each individual person attending and what kind of speakers they've got. But I'm coming from, if we as the producers of that content make sure that what we are streaming out is of best quality possible, then that's us done our bit, if that makes sense, Dougal. So there.
Absolutely.
These are the things that I'm interested in, and I think actually they're not dissimilar to all of us that's here and the people who will be watching this video after the fact. We're all coming at it from a different angle. You know, David's an arts development director, Kat's theatre, I'm cinema and production events, Helen's a funder. But I think what we're all looking for is the ability to know what kit we've got, so that we can do it in our own workplaces, but also remotely somewhere else if we're going somewhere else, and then making sure that the sound quality is right and the picture quality is right. I think that's what we need the biggest amount of help with. I think would folks agree with that? There you go.
Great, thanks. Really interesting, the community cinema approach, and I'm actually involved in director of a community cinema project called Cinemore 77, which you probably know about, which started screenings in a yurt at festivals, and it's kind of evolved, and they're doing an interesting development program with community cinema projects through Cinema for All. But you know, they're exploring different ways of doing things, and they're not really looking at online particularly, but I think that what you're talking about there with a flexible approach to pay-per-view is really interesting, and where you can have you can do screenings in a place, you can have an audience watching at home, however they're watching that on their TVs or devices, or you could have remote screenings in different places where people would come together potentially. You know,
that's exactly what we're doing. So basically, we work with other cinema providers. Like, for example, there's an organisation in Wigtonshire called Driftwood Cinema. So we work very closely with them, and Driftwood have an entire network of village halls and cinema groups and all over the region that like to watch films. So historically, that's all been done by DVD, and that's absolutely fine. That can still go ahead. Driftwood continues to do that, and that's fine. But now that we've got our platform, we can make it available to all the other groups in the region, so that if they want to show a film, they can actually show it. But all they need to actually do is go into our platform, and it's there.
Yeah.
But they can put that on their big screen. So if Catstrand wanted to show a film, they would access ours. If you wanted Cat to show a film in your theatre, you could access our platform. And that way it's a much easier way for everyone to have access to the cinema. It doesn't make
your
us money,
platforms, yeah.
unfortunately, because we haven't figured that bit out yet. But anyway, yeah, the technical side of things.
Yeah, I mean, your platform therefore is offering kind of rights, catalogue and distribution.
Kind of, yes.
As a one-stop shop. And actually there's a lot of overlap with live performance there in terms of potential models. There are analogies that I can draw with NT Live and that kind of model where, you know, the National Theatre in London has pioneered this for a long time, and other performing arts organizations do. I hosted a discussion a few years ago at Expo North, went pre-pandemic, with the producer of NT Live and digital manager of London Symphony Orchestra and the marketing manager from the National Piping Centre, and talking about different events that were real world events, but were also made available online, and we were exploring, you know, different models for that. And the NT Live model has always interested me because they stream from theatre into arts venues, you know, mostly cinemas, and therefore extend a shared experience. And that it's actually a interesting analogy of that in the TED conference model, where TED have a fairly elitist approach actually in terms of their conference, because it's extremely expensive to attend, but they then offer a vastly reduced price of a live streamed version to academic institutions, where they can screen the content for their students and staff, and then over time it cascades out to being available online through their YouTube channel and website for free, paid for by their sponsors. But I think that there are complexities in the model that you're talking about in terms of how you monetize that effectively and still maintain the community access to it. But there are lots of different models that you could explore with it. And there was a live music project that me and some people I've been working with knew from Eindhoven in the Netherlands, that from a very progressive venue there called FNR, which they started doing these isolation sessions during the pandemic. And initially they were free with donations, and they had attracted some donations, but you know, they were underwriting the costs of the technical production, content production, and a fee for the artists. So the donations did not recoup that. But over time, they moved into pay-per-view, and in parallel to that, they had people creating a blockchain distribution or like monetization system, where so it was using the blockchain, I don't know enough about it to even know how to describe it, but the method by which cryptocurrency is run. But essentially what that meant was that every time somebody buys a ticket, all of the rights information is plugged into the administrative system. So every time someone buys a ticket, all the money is split and sent to exactly where it needs to be. So that can take care of all your performing rights and all of the associated trade relationships in one go, without having to do, kind of all of that back office work afterwards. And it means that people get paid immediately. So that was particularly interesting, very effective in music, but it could,
So does that,
too could work in.
How does that work for a live performance? So if we have a meeting and we're live streaming a blended event and we've got a local musician playing music, right? We've arranged a fee for them and we've to perform for us, and it's going online. How's the industry handling all of that? Like, if it's recorded and we go back to it, that person's performance is recorded and on a website, or if we live stream a theatre production and make it available, how is all of that handled at the moment from a technical perspective? How do you even, honestly, it's a massive subject. Even if you could signpost me to some information about it, that would be really useful.
Yeah. I'll try and answer that briefly and then not get sidetracked into the wormhole of online rights.
No,
because we could talk about that for an entire session. But for music, that interesting blockchain model aside, for music, if you're having live performance, then similar rights requirements and liabilities exist with music. I should say that I'm also a director of Scotland's music trade body, the Scottish Music Industry Association, and I grew into working with that through my work in music media, and because of my work with the SMIA and also through my company, I know I often joke that I know more about music rights online than is healthy, and then I want to know, and unfortunately I know everything about the pitfalls of it. I know sometimes I really do wish I didn't, but relatively straightforward what you're talking about. Something to be aware of is if you have a live music performance, live music is easier to think about than recorded music in quite a few ways. If you have a live music performance, say it's in a theatre, and the theatre has its license agreements with PRS and PPL, so the copyright collections, copyright management organizations, which collect for, PRS collect on behalf of songwriters and publishers, and PPL collect on behalf of the owner of the sound recordings and the artists who play on that recording. And the rights are distributed accordingly. So that covers music performance in the venue. It does not extend to online as well. So sometimes people can be under the false impression that because the venue has its licenses already, then that will cover the music for online, but it doesn't. So if you're dealing with live music particularly, then you need an online music license. So there's PRS for Music, which is the alliance between PRS and MCPS, the Mechanical Copyright Protection Society. Don't need to worry about the difference between the two. They both collect on behalf of publishers and songwriters. So they have an agreement with they have a license, a number of licenses available. So their online music license and their limited online music license are the ones to look at. For most purposes of most of the people watching this, then we'd say the limited online music license is the one to go for. And that starts, I think, for, not looking at the page at the moment, but that starts from pretty much as low as £130 a year. And that will cover you for a number of uses. They do tailor the license depending on what you want to use it for, but for example, live and on-demand streaming and some podcast provision as well, some downloadable use. And it can cover, importantly, audio and video. The licenses that my company usually takes out with them are for more televisual kind of performance, where music is part of a program, but it's not the only thing in the program, which is probably more what you're talking about as well. So they're pretty flexible and relatively easy to deal with. It gets much more difficult if there's a brand involved, if there's a brand sponsor involved. Then that's really a conversation between PRS and potentially the brand in terms of how the music's going to be used. Is the music used to sell that brand? If it's not, then it doesn't really need to get in the way, but there might be a requirement or a stipulation that you can't have the brand explicitly on screen at the same time as the live music performance, because that might constitute a direct relationship between associating the music with the sponsor, which could require, it might incur an extra fee. It might be something that understandably might get into a negotiation point of view. But let's put that aside and just, you can get yourself covered for online performance of it relatively easily. And the rest of it is what you already said. You negotiate a fee with the music and the performers. The good thing about the PRS license is it will cover you for anything that is licensed within their catalogue. So, including if the artist plays a cover.
David.
Just unmute myself. That's thanks, Dougal. I've got a quick question just to clarify in my head, actually, just what you've just said there. So please don't feel like you've got to go into any detail about licensing, because I know we could get lost into a very dark hole. But for I'm just maybe thinking of a scenario. Sometimes we like Tabby mentioned our AGM, at the back end of that, we may have like a singer-songwriter perform some songs, sort of a performance poet do some things. We might have another artist share a video by way of just sharing their creative expression to an audience, non-paying audience. Would we need a digital on license for that type of activity? And maybe a follow-up question, maybe for someone like Kat, if she was doing workshops and was using sort of music as part of that program for the, young theatre makers, would Kat need some sort of online digital license as well for that type of participatory program?
Good questions. So you're talking about recorded music there?
It could be, for Kat, I would imagine, be recorded music, yeah. Ours would probably be a mixture, could be recorded by the artist specifically for that AGM, or they could be there live. We could plug them in live. So we've done that before.
All right, cool. Well, if taking that first, if yours is recorded specially for the event, original music, would that be?
Yeah. It wouldn't be a cover. Yeah.
If it's original music by the artist who's performing it and they've created it for that event, or they own the rights and they're able to to administer those rights, then that is relatively straightforward, and it doesn't, whether they've pre-recorded it or you've pre-recorded it with them or whatever, and it's played as part, or it's a live performance as part of the event, it doesn't constitute any, it doesn't require any additional licensing to what I talked about. The limited online music license from PRS for Music will cover you. They are the media online team at PRS are pretty helpful, you know, just discuss the use cases with them. But if you have a look on the website, the limited online music license will cover you for everything you need for that. The other question about, like, so is the recorded music in anything really? That becomes a lot more difficult, really, because when you get into using recorded music, then you need a license from PPL, and they don't have an equivalent to the limited online music license. For audio only, for internet radio, they have the small webcasters license, but that does not cover video. And if you have recorded music, then, especially if it's recorded music in the background of some live performance, then technically you're getting into sync licensing. So that's music synchronized with live visuals. And that is, I was trying to think of another way of not saying world of pain, but you know, like that, you're getting into a series of complicated conversations there, because it can be difficult to find out who even owns it. And then, you know, I've gone down this road with theatre and performing arts at numerous times, and it's always, you know, one of the most stressful things about it is when artistic directors or producers are like, we're going to use this music, and we get involved in the clearance, or we're somehow associated with it. And we're like, well, that's what you think, but I doubt it, because we know that rights holder is going to say no, or they're going to charge you amount of money that's going to be you know, infeasible for you to pay, and there's a naivety in the creative person who wants to use that track by a large, you know, mainstream artist. And, you know, and people come up with the nonsense that of like, oh, you can play a certain amount of seconds, and there's no provision for that at all. Play any fraction of it and you have to pay. But sometimes you can get, you can be surprised. So you can contact the rights holders, and they may say, oh, it's a community project, it's an education project, it's a charity project. Do you know what? That's fine. We're happy to waive the fee. But as soon as you get into that sync licensing negotiation, you're not just dealing with the rights organizations, you are dealing with the rights holders. And so even though the PRS don't have a sync license, a blanket sync license in the same way, they can help to an extent, a little bit more than PPL can. Both of them can help you try and find the rights holders. But as soon as you get into that, speaking to the rights holder of the recording, then you need to go and speak to the rights holder of the publishing as well. And they use this term that is, you know, I've mostly heard used in this context of most favored nation. So it's like, if you're paying, you know, if one of them is asking for 500 quid, the other one wants 500 quid. You know, and there's sometimes you can, you know, I've had stuff where like the rights holder, the owner of the recording of a big name artist tune for a particular usage, was like, do you know what? That's fine. You can just use it. It's no problem. but the publisher said, no, you cannot. No, we want £1,000 for that. And then the recording artist, well, hang on, if you're getting £1,000, we want £1,000. And then, and then you're into a kind of, and eventually, you might be able to get them both down to, but, meanwhile, we advise, can you not use something else? And then you're going back to the people on the artistic side of the production and like, oh no, don't want to compromise, but you're faced with the reality of how it works online. So, and see, it doesn't work that way in the theatre and the physical venue space, because there are licenses for performance with PPL and PRS which cover that. So it's an important. I don't want to go down further down that wormhole. I don't think that'd be that useful, because this is not a
we need to stay away from licenses.
workshop. But it is very important to know that that's what you're dealing with. So my advice is work with live music where possible, which is a great thing to do anyway, and or work with artists who own and administer their own rights. And I mean, yes, you can use library music. I'm not that keen on that. And I'd much rather that, working with artists where you can do deals and, have relationships or directly. Any kind of performance should be paid for and should be recognized. Any kind of performance, not just music. But yeah, if you can work with people, in that sense, then great. And in terms of something that used recorded music by a mainstream artist, just find someone else, I'd say, because it's just not going to be feasible to use it. Worth mentioning, however, one platform that is really for DJs, Mixcloud, which is a great platform, which their market really is DJs, radio producers, and musicians, podcasters, but they grew out a kind of alternative radio culture, DJ culture, and Mixcloud for a long time was on-demand audio streaming platform, kind of like SoundCloud, but for DJ mixes. But crucially different to SoundCloud is that they were one of the first platform to be licensed, to have license agreements with PRS and PPL. So they were absolutely fully covered for both. And the founder of it told me that it was the best and worst thing he ever did, because it was expensive and complicated, but it made them fully licensed. So we recommend them all the time. If you have, it doesn't need to be for a DJ mix. If you have some kind of audio a podcast that uses commercial music, then if you put it on Mixcloud, you're fully licensed. And then, of course, you can embed it on any website. They then got into video, but for the live video streaming of DJ mixes. So it wouldn't cover you for sync. That would be cheeky, and that that's beyond the scope of the music. But if you were having some kind of live discussion program or live participatory event in some way, then there's the potential to use Mixcloud as an audio and video platform, because again, they're fully covered from the licensing, which is quite interesting. And that's also thinking about the platform you use might help you avoid some of the licensing complications, because YouTube, but like very few of them have relationship with PPL. So play of recorded music is difficult to impossible, or you need, because you need to agree the rights with the rights holder. But increasingly, like PRS's strategy, they told me this years ago, was license the platform, not the user, not the creator, because it's much more efficient. And so YouTube was one of the first, but Facebook eventually joined in, SoundCloud is like, so more and more of the platforms are licensed, so check. But it might be that just by focusing on the platform you're going to use, you're already covered.
Okay.
Thanks, Dougal. I'm mindful of the time, so I just want to make sure that we cover some of the other technical aspects of blended events, like maybe some recommendations for meeting kits, and then if there's anything specific you are interested in knowing, Kat or Helen, let's pick Dougal's brains.
Well, when you're talking about meeting kits, really the principles are the same as for anything. So as for any kind of capture and presentation online of the real world event. So, I mean, in a way, what we're all doing with each other on this, you know, like in the 5 people in this live event here, is the same thing. So like I'm speaking to you, and you probably all are too, with the same kinds of technology. So I've got a computer, a webcam, and a microphone, and I have some lights in the room as well, and it's quite a lot of natural light. And I can't think of a way to show you the webcam, but I have a mirror handy. But let's hang on. I use my iPad camera, then I can show you. So let's see. That so hang on.
That's so cool that you can do
The wrong way, right? Hang on.
Oh,
Right. So this is my webcam. I invested in this at the start of the pandemic, where the price was hiked way up. We've come down to a more reasonable price now. It was the best one I could get at the time, because I thought, right, I'm just going to get a really good webcam. So it's a Logitech Brio, which is a 4K webcam. Can't remember. I don't know what they retail for at the moment. I don't want to tell you how much I paid for it, because it was way over the odds. Because you could not get webcams in March 2020 or April 2020. But Logitech do make, they're a particularly good brand, I think, for webcams. But there's lots of good stuff available. The mic I've got is this fun-looking thing. This is by Neat Microphones, and it's the Widget range. This is Widget C, inspired as a retro space age kind of vibe to it. And it's £35, so that's completely the other end. And I got it because I was intrigued by it. I've got other microphones by the same company, and I thought, I've got a wide variety of mics for different uses, and I might invest in a really good USB mic at some point, but this one is actually surprisingly really good for 35 quid. It's great. And then I've just got standard lighting in this room, but I'm aware of I do have a little video light here that I even charged it up, because I've got natural light coming in through this side. It's less important, but I've just turned on a little light that this is difficult. What am I doing? Is this right? Yeah. So I'm getting quite confused as to how. Yeah, there it is. So a little light that I've just stuck onto.
yeah.
That's an internal window in my flat, and so that's quite useful. It's designed to be able to stick on the top of a laptop or something like that. But you mentioned a ring light earlier on, Tabby, and you can, they're good.
My ring light there.
Yeah, they're good. They can be used just as a general light source, but they're also they're mostly meant for putting the camera in the middle of it and for addressing the screen, and that kind of grew out of the vlogging kind of YouTuber, Instagrammer sort of market, and really that the rise of the YouTuber and equivalent for other social platforms has propelled the development and availability of live video production kit, which is great. And when we never really used to do anything in the kind of DIY or like mobile streaming end of things, because we typically will do televisual style multi-camera shoots, and that's the main thrust of what we do. But when we did get into, we were approached to do workshops on DIY live streaming with smartphones, and started to explore this quite a number of years ago now, was amazed by the amount of kit that you can get low cost. So the fundamental things you need are camera, microphone, some way of capturing that into the computer, and then you need to encode that and send it online. And actually, it might be helpful for me to bring up just a little diagram just to illustrate this.
So while you're getting your diagram up, the other thing I think would be interesting to know from your perspective and experience is whether you prefer Zoom or Teams, because an awful lot of the events that we have to attend or that are being offered use one of these two platforms, or is there something else that's worth trying? It's just interesting. I mean, I think the pandemic resulted in everybody was on Zoom, but then the public sector and a lot of the bigger organizations use Teams as well because it seems to be more secure. Teams doesn't seem to be as good at allowing for the audio visual side of things. It seems more business oriented, but it'd be interesting to know what you thought about those two platforms and which one is best for events.
Yeah, okay, cool. Before I talk about that, I'll just show you this thing.
Yeah, I've enabled share, so you should be able to.
Great, thank you. Sorry. I've got a second monitor here on this computer because I've learned that the best way of sharing something on Zoom where I can have it full screen so it looks good, but still see it once I go to the sharing, is to use a second monitor. Doesn't really work otherwise. So you need to either, especially as I'm using Google presentations here, like Google Drive, and because we do most of our document type work in Google Drive, including presentations. I never use PowerPoint, but I sometimes use Keynote on the Mac, but and by extension kind of PowerPoint through that. But I almost always use Google presentations, and if you don't use a second monitor with an online video platform, then it's very difficult to do it full screen. So that's worth bearing in mind. I've just got a cheap second HDMI monitor that I was almost going to get rid of at work because we just didn't. Well, chiefly because every time you change a setting on it, it makes a beep and there's no way of turning that off. So it's really not useful in a live production setting, especially if you're in the same room as a live performance. To have this sound all the time is completely useless. So anyway, looking at this live streaming process thing, I created this chart because this shows you what's going on with any kind of, whether it's a live stream or a online, a webinar or whatever. You've got you're capturing the action, then you're directing it, processing it, encoding it, uploading it, and distributing it. And so, capturing through cameras and microphones, and that would be one or more camera and mics, and any other input sources that could be graphics, text, pre-recorded videos, VTs. Cheers, Helen. Thank you. Take care. You're then directing that, so you might be mixing, cutting, whatever, or it may just be one camera and one microphone throughout. But even if you're not doing any technical direction, you're still directing the action of the event. I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. It's then processed in some way, whether you are doing anything actively to process it, such as mixing levels and so on, or any plugins or any enhancement to that, or not. It is being processed by the device that you're using. It's encoded into a format that can be streamed, whether that's a live stream through a live streaming platform or a video meeting, and then it's uploaded to the internet through your internet connection. Then from there, it's distributed to the audience via the platform. And so all of the bits in red, the reason I differentiated that is because a friend once asked a kind of a naive but very important and useful question. If you can live stream on a phone, why is what you do so difficult? And I was like, that's a good question. Is that because the phone does so much of it? Everything in red on that chart is done by the phone. It's only the distribution to the audience that isn't. So that's where, as soon as you leave the smartphone and go into any, or the tablet, or to an extent a laptop, then everything else is. But really, a phone and a tablet will handle all of that with a minimum of user interaction required. With a laptop, yes, you can do that, but you still need to use a bit more software and so on. So we can talk a bit more about cameras and mics and different bits of kit. But going back to your question there, Tabby, about platforms and what would I prefer for meetings. I mean, the honest answer is, don't make me choose between these two horrible platforms, but I can't stand either of them. I thought, well, I have very little interest in bending platforms to suit something beyond what they're originally intended for. But I think Zoom. See, I used to really like Zoom until the pandemic happened, and then I got really annoyed by how much people tried to use it for stuff it's not for, and it doesn't suit that. So, but I think Zoom has, on the one hand, it's become ubiquitous, which is useful, and it is a solid meeting platform. It is really a really decent meeting platform. It's not particularly feature rich. and it has a bewilderingly complicated settings administration on the website end of things. The app is all right, but you also then you need to use an app, whether that's on your smartphone or tablet or computer. There isn't really a simple web-only interface for it. So I far prefer website based platforms like Google Meet, for example. Far prefer it because it's really immediate and straightforward. However, out of Zoom and Teams, Zoom, hands down, because it's much more accessible. Teams would be great if it worked, but it's so clunky. And like, how many times have you been either been in a Teams meeting where everyone arrives late, or arrived late to a Teams meeting despite trying to connect for 10 minutes beforehand because, oh, you got to log out of that account because you use that account for that organization, and then you got to log into the Microsoft Authenticator, and it just sent round. It's in a frustrating loop, and then sometimes give up entirely on phone, and it's just ridiculous, you know. So Teams would be really good if it worked properly, but I think it was cobbled together far too quickly, built off the back of Skype, which why break what already worked fine and was the industry standard forever before the pandemic. So yeah, but unfortunately, because there were perceived security risks, or maybe actual security risks, with Zoom in the early days of the pandemic, that put all the lumbering corporate and public sector organizations into, you know, the IT arms of those into fear mode with Zoom. And so they were like, oh no, we can't possibly use Zoom. And so they're like, we must use enterprise system like Teams or woe-betide WebEx or something like that. So I'm speaking quite freely and out of term, despite the fact this has been recorded, because I just, you asked my opinion and that's that. But and you know, I've used all of these things, but yeah, Zoom hands down beats any other like corporate kind of platform, and it's amazing. We used to use it actually as an online meeting platform over Skype for remote participation in live events, and we used it in like two interesting blended, if you like, events to cite. Is one was Granite Noir, crime writing festival in Aberdeen, where we used Zoom as a one-to-one link up with a crime writing festival that was happening on the same weekend in Colorado. And we had an event that happened between these two destinations, and we used Zoom to link them up. So they had, we were coming from the Lemon Tree in Aberdeen, they were coming from a university campus, and I forget the small town where it happened. And both places had a moderator and panelists, and we linked them up, and we had big screens in both places, and it was great. And we used Zoom over Skype actually because the quality was better, and it was a more customizable experience. And you can do things like, you know, if you tinker with Zoom, you can turn off, you know, everything apart from the full screen video, and it's just a lot more extensible. So for utilizing it as part of a live event, found it very useful for that. That was quite, I don't know, 2018 maybe. And then in 2019, we did a very ambitious project for Charts, which is Culture, Heritage and Arts in Argyll and the Isles, is the long name of that they abbreviated to Charts. And it's essentially an arts network. And as the launch event for that, we had this showcase event in Oban, but we had a really interesting project live music performance coming from Jura, from a recording studio in Jura, with people participating by mobile phone from all over the world. And so they were dialing into this performance in Jura, and that was, we had a producer there working with the musician behind it, streaming it into our venue in Oban, where we relayed it to a big screen in PA and captured all of that as part of our multi-camera shoot, and then streamed that out on live stream and Facebook. And so there's a lot going on there, and we use Zoom for that very effectively. But in the past, before that, with conferences, we typically used Skype, and all of these things are getting into the stuff we touched on a bit earlier, about how do you get that online experience to be as good as possible, so it's as much as you can on a level with being there, and vice versa, so that the remote contributors are seen and heard well, and then the people in the room experience that well also. And so that is the tricky bit, and that's where you need to think about how do you best use the screen, how do you best use the mics, and the technical setup that you have in the space to do that effectively. But it's quite difficult to to drill into that, because there are so many different potential examples. Oh, hi.
Hello, sorry, my computer froze and completely died.
No problem. Such as online.
Just as we were talking about reliability of platforms.
Yeah. Tabby, you're muted. Oh,
Tabby, you're on mute.
Sorry, apologies. I didn't realize I was on mute. Thank you, David. Kat, did you have any questions just before we finish things off? Was there anything else you needed to ask Dougal? I'm glad we got you back.
Yeah, me too. So 2 questions that I've got are, first of all, if you have any advice for so our workshops are very active. It's very rare that I will sit down when I'm sort of running an event or a workshop. So if there's any advice for for sort of live streaming and bringing in a blended element to that. And then what was my other question? I've forgotten it. If you answer that question, and I'll try and remember what my other one was.
Okay, what media, like video, audio kit do you have, if any, or have access to?
So we have got a DSLR camera that has video on it. We've got various mics and stuff, and we've just started a podcast, so we've got a couple of quite good mics for that. We've got it's loads of bits and pieces. We've got a bit of lighting, and the theatre lighting as well, but that doesn't usually it's quite intense. So yeah, sort of small kit, not nothing, but nothing too fancy.
No, that's a really good start. So camera's crucial to this. So if you've got a DSLR, that is potentially something you can use. What is it, out of interest?
Oh, I've forgotten, a Canon something.
Right, one of the Canon DSLRs.
Yeah.
So from that, you'll be able to get a clean feed out of it. So, nothing else on the screen apart from the picture, on HDMI. And it might be mini or micro or whatever, but a type of HDMI plug. And so what you need to do is capture that into a computer. Much easier, as soon as you leave the smartphone or tablet world that I was talking about, So I'm trying to think of the most succinct way of talking about this, because there are so many different approaches to it. But let's assume that you want to use that camera, right? We'll talk about that way of doing it first. It's quite difficult to incorporate a camera into a mobile device. So that's not, because in that case, it's like, why would you need to use another camera? There are actually ways of mixing mobiles together, of like effectively having a multi-camera shoot of different mobile devices. There are various apps where you wouldn't even need to use a computer, which is pretty cool. There's one called AirMix, I think, that does that. But let's say you want to use that camera and maybe some other cameras, but you need to have a capture device. So that is, it's got a HDMI or SDI, which is the professional type of input on a BNC connector, but mostly people would be working with the HDMI cameras. Some capture devices offer both HDMI and SDI, some are HDMI only. And for example, I've got one in my bag somewhere. I once had to live stream my partner's dad's funeral in October 2020, and we were there, and I didn't have any equipment, and the family really wanted me to stream it, and we managed to cobble together equipment, it's kind of borrowed, and a few bits and pieces bought, because it was in Rugby. I was a long way from Glasgow and didn't have access to any of my stuff, and I bought this, I think, from Argos, Elgato Camlink, low cost HDMI capture device. It's not necessarily one I totally recommend, by the way, because it can be a little bit, it's not all things to all uses, but it was low cost. I always carry it in my bag, because I'm like, I never want to be without a capture device ever again, just in case. Hopefully not for a funeral, but just in case I find myself in a situation where it's like, can you help us live stream this? And so what you do is you just, that's a USB device, you just connect it into your computer and you plug the camera in there, and that'll get one camera source into your computer, and then as a webcam, that effectively turns your camera into a webcam, and then you can use that with, you can actually use it via a browser interface with many live streaming platforms, particularly if we're talking about the free to use platforms. Mostly really you're talking about Facebook and YouTube there.
Okay.
My preference would be YouTube. I think it's better quality and more stable, but Facebook is pretty good too. Facebook also has quite a good web interface called Facebook Producer, where you can apply graphics and things like that. If you wanted to use streaming software, though, where you could add your own graphics, you could play videos, like pre-recorded videos, cutting to those, and you could potentially bring in other camera sources too. Then you want to use OBS, which stands for Open Broadcaster Software, and it is the free cross-platform open source live production software, and it's amazing given it's free. And it's kind of the equivalent to, in the audio world, there's Audacity, which is the open source cross-platform audio editor. There's a quite a decent one in the video editing world called Shotcut, and so those three are a brilliant trio for live program making, really. Audacity and Shotcut for either editing the recording afterwards or for creating material that you might want to play out. OBS it's amazing given it's free, but it takes a bit to learn it, but there's extensive tutorial videos on YouTube and so on about it. So that will cover you for the video side of things. And then audio wise, you say you've got a range of microphones. So you might want to think about some wireless mics, or for workshop leaders or performers, or you might just choose to mic up the room. And with theatre, there's a number of different ways of doing that, including well positioned hung microphones from a grid or a lighting bar or something like that can work quite well. Or you can just have a pair of mics, either in a X position or a Y position, facing the action. Or you could have an array of microphones around the room if you could. You would, as soon as you have more than one or two mics, then you will need to go through an audio mixer. And again, that needs to be captured into the computer. That could be done via the camera, potentially. The camera will have a microphone input. Typically, that's just going to be a mini jack input, like a standard headphone jack. There are actually some really good bits of kit for mixing mics on a DSLR. So in fact, if I just very quickly do a search for this. Sorry. Oh. Actually, if you just search for DSLR microphone mixer, there's one that there's a low cost one that Samaronic do, called SR Pax 1. That's 120 quid. So obviously when I say low cost, that's a relative term, but in terms of media kit, that is low cost. And that has two, I think it's got two inputs, and you plug the mics into that, and it sits on top of the camera. It's got a hot shoe mount, and very useful. You can get a number of these different kinds of things that would be simple to use, but extend that. And then if the audio is coming in embedded on the HDMI connection through the camera, then you don't need to worry about sync issues between the audio and the video. If you're capturing the audio separately into the computer, maybe through an audio mixer that ideally would have a USB output, so you can plug it into the computer too, and you can still use it as effectively a webcam and USB mic straight into Facebook or YouTube or LinkedIn or whatever. Or you can use it through software like OBS, and but you might have a delay issue, a sync issue. If that's where you would want to use OBS, and you can then from OBS send it to Facebook or YouTube or whatever. But you can treat the sync issue, because the sync issue happens because audio is captured quicker than video, as far as I understand it, because it's simpler to process for the computer. And so there will be several frames worth or milliseconds worth of delay needed to be applied to the audio to match it up. And the easiest and most simple way so OBS has audio delay built, a setting for it. Or, like we use hardware audio delays, but we sometimes use the software as well. And the way that we always test it is, or mostly test it, because it's the simplest way of doing it, is you just have somebody stand in front of the camera and do a clap and then get them to speak as well, and just make sure every time I'm doing this sort of thing, by the way, it throws out the autofocus on my camera, so which then needs to readjust. Come back. But the so the right.
There it is.
Yeah, you want to make sure it's in sync, because that's incredibly off-putting for the online audience. If it's not, you can fix it in the post-production if that does happen before you make a recording available online, but you want to avoid that happening in the first place. And that would come on to the absolute requirement for testing and monitoring as well. So that's difficult to do. Testing is something everybody should do, testing and rehearsal. And you want to stream it privately, have somebody else watch it, record it, watch it back, and tinker and adjust until you're happy with the setup. Monitoring is difficult to do if it's just you doing it. So in the, if it were something, I mean, if it's a live event, you'd hope that you're not the only person involved. It's not impossible though, is it? But that's a lot to manage. There's a lot of demand on brain power and physically. So I would hope that you get somebody else involved to help produce it, and crucially to monitor it. In the early days of live video streaming, we might not always be monitoring the output as the viewer sees it and experiences it and hears it as much as we should have. And so then you don't want the online audience or a client telling you there's something wrong. You want to have spotted that before that happens. There are though lots of issues that online audience might have that that aren't there for you. So like there are some common classic ones, like people have got more than one window of the video player open, so they're like, there's an echo, or I can hear this twice, why is that? And it's like, well, because you've got two video players open. Or I can't hear it at all. Well, have you muted the sound? And or I've got audio sync issues. There were people watching the World Pipe Band Championships live stream we were doing on Friday, saying it's the sync's out. And we said, well, no, it's just that we've been streaming for 6 hours now. And so the video player we were using, livestream.com, drifts over time. And it's like, just refresh the page and it brings it back into sync.
A live stream for 6 hours sounds exhausting. I was exhausted after our circuit and AGM, and that was just 2 hours. So
yeah,
6 hours sounds just wipe out material. Dougal, thank you very much. I'm going to call things to a halt now because we have used up nearly all of our time. Thank you very much. I think there's no doubt that we could probably do with having you come back and tell us more stuff specifically about every one of the topics that you covered with us today. So I really, really appreciate that you've spent some time with us. I know that our members will get an awful lot out of this. I think what I might do is get in touch with you afterwards, and we can kind of put the links together for the various platforms and pieces of equipment and things, just so that we can share it when we share the video.
I'd like to share a catalogue of links with you.
That would be cool, please.
We compile them for exactly this kind of reason.
Yeah, that would be great.
And we're really happy that the more people using this and doing this, the better in our book. And sometimes people would say, oh, aren't you doing yourself out of work? But no, because it's not like everybody's going to be able to afford a production company to come in and do something for them. And the more people actively involved in this, then the more it grows the market as well. And it's exciting to be able to make live programs out of live activities. And if you're going to the effort of doing something, a live event of some kind, whether it's as kind of simple and straightforward, relatively speaking, as a meeting, or it's a workshop or a class, or it's a live performance, or it's a conference, you put all that effort into it, it would be great to at least record it, if not make it available live to an online audience too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm passionate about that, and I'm very keen that more people get involved in doing it.
Thanks, Dougal. You've rubbed it all. Honestly, your enthusiasm is going to rub off on us and the other members who watch this video. So thank you so much. I'm just going to stop recording now.